I will start from the key debates of today. We can see there are, let's say, four major trends. One is obviously green. The other one is more vocal and more everyday autonomous driving. Then, of course, we have the connected, which looks like more advanced than the rest, somehow. But I'm not surprised. I'm sure you even less than me. And more we talk about the so-called ride sharing, somehow the transportation. First of all, how real are these trends? How important are really these trends? First, for people or for the politicians, and how quick they are coming?
Well, it's a great question. If I knew the answer, possibly it would be great, but let me share with you a few things. First of all of those trends that you have just mentioned are embraced in our Push to Pass strategic plan, being the technology push, the innovation through the technology, being the mobility services activities that we have launched with our Free to Move brand. All of this is embraced in this plan. Now, what we don't know is the speed at which these trends are going to materialize, and we don't know at which speed they will extend all over the world, which means that in this very chaotic world that we are now facing, agility is going to be the key factor of success. Having a great company and not necessarily a big company is, from my perspective, what is the most important. What we are trying to do at PSA is to be ready on driverless cars by 2021. This is where we think we'll have a mature, safe technology that we can launch in production. Connectivity is already existing, so we'll continue on that path. We know that in terms of zero emissions, this is going to be a must for the industry. We don't know at which speed this is going to develop because it's very much dependent on the infrastructure, and all the countries, all the markets are not alike in terms of capability to invest in the infrastructure, and of course the industry does not have the means to do so. So the speed will depend very much on those financing capabilities. All of this is real. All of this is happening. This is not just perspective, this is a reality. What we don't know is the speed and how fast, in terms of regional coverage, this is going to appear. But what I would like to say also is that we should also be mindful of the fact that there is a growing divergence between what is happening on mobility in the urban areas and what is happening outside of the urban areas. You know, I just would like to mention an example that is quite surprising for many of my teammates. We should know that in France, which is not recognized as a poor country, is a wealthy country compared with many other countries, there is 25% of the population who is in a working age that has already lost a job opportunity because of the lack of mobility. And this is coming from the rural areas. It's not coming from the urban areas, which means that when we talk about car sharing, when we talk about green technology, connected technology, driverless cars, all of these technologies have a big cost and therefore will have a big price. So we should not forget that the need for mobility, not to mention the need for freedom of mobility, is something which is widespread, and it's not felt, it's not lived in the same way in urban areas and rural areas. So we also see a divergence in terms of finding the best ways to meet those needs between those two areas. And we should be mindful of this divergence, because what is happening in the cities is not necessarily going to happen in rural areas. And what is happening in mature markets will not happen necessarily at the same speed in emerging markets. So this is also something that our industry needs to take into consideration.
You mentioned 2021, the driverless. I'm first of all interested if you use your technology or you are imagining to use the other people's technology. I just saw in Detroit some statements coming from Google, Waymo nowadays, saying very clearly they are open to work with everybody. They don't have any exclusivity. That's one thing. And how far you will go with the driverless will be a real driverless car, and which philosophy are you using? keeping the wheel and the pedals, or like in the Google case, Waymo case, you take out everything?
It's a great question. You know, before I answer that question, I would like to share some sort of vision on that matter. You know that some of the US companies have stated that they want to go from scratch directly to a driverless car where people don't have to get a driver license anymore. We don't believe that that is the right path for a very simple reason. One of the things that people will not compromise on, absolutely no compromise, is safety. People will enjoy driverless cars if they feel that it is safe.
100%.
100% safe. Which means that the OEMs, the car companies, have on average 1 century of experience, expertise, and knowledge accumulated in terms of improving the safety of our products, being active or passive safety. Which means that what we have decided by PSA is to reach this level of driverless cars on a step-by-step approach, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, making sure that at each step we consolidate the technology, we master the technology to make sure that it's completely safe at the end of the process. This is our vision, and we believe that the customers will not compromise on safety, hence the fact that we need to consolidate each of those technological steps. The second point, which is, I think, in the DNA of our company, is that we are always open for collaboration. Being on conventional OEM deals, strategic deals, software collaboration, we are always open. We are a company that understands that now the world is open, it's global, and of course there is a race for talent, there is a race for know-how, and therefore we are very open to collaborate with any kind of company. Many times the journalists ask me, are you afraid of the GAFA? And my answer is very simple. I think if the GAFA are what they are, successful companies, is because they are run by wise people, intelligent and wise people. And if I sit on their side and look at the automotive industry, what do they see? They see huge investments, they see poor profitability, they see huge risks, and many emotional decisions. So the question to those wise people would be, why do you want to go in that industry? It's a very risky industry, very tough, very competitive. You need a lot of accumulated experience and know-how in terms of safety, in terms of any other performance. So because they are wise, intelligent people, I believe that they will come to the conclusion that it is best to partner with an OEM rather than to try to do the cars themselves. So on that perspective, we are very open, of course, to collaborations. But we also have the capability, because we are now a healthy and profitable company, to fund our own developments if that was to be the final choice.
Let me go to the engines. It looks like diesel was initially hammered by the Dieselgate, and we can see even here in Paris, as we are, that diesel is continuing to be hammered by the politicians. And we at AUTOBEST, we believe that we entered a new era, which we are calling time frame window of the hybrids, because it's looking like the hybrid benzene, gasoline, it's the best solution we have for a certain period of time. What do you think will happen first with diesel, not only in France, generally speaking in Europe, and if it's really, according to your vision, a time frame window for the hybrids?
It's a great question, and I may agree with you. I would like just to frame the situation by saying the following. First of all, if the diesel mix in Europe is what it is today, and specifically in France, it is the pure consequence of two things. The one is the huge pressure that was put in the automotive industry to reduce the CO2 emissions. The CO2 emissions reduction was funneled to the diesel because diesel was the most affordable technology to meet those requirements. Back then.
Very important.
And many countries like France for 30 years, no less than 30 years, had a tax policy that was pushing the consumer towards diesel because the fuel efficiency was better, the CO2 emissions were lower, and this is what we were requested to do. At the end of this process, other things, other pollutants were put under the light, and therefore policies change. What I'd like to say is, of course, we are here to make our customers happy, period. We are here to give hybrid petrol, which we are developing, electric vehicles, diesel, petrol, downsize, direct injection, turbo engines, no problem. This is our job, and we are agile enough and healthy enough to do so, and we will bring all of those technologies. We are already bringing those technologies to our consumers. But what I would like to call for is a little bit more thoughtful consideration of the problem of clean air. Clean air needs to be addressed through the limitation of pollutants. Somebody has to define what is the portfolio of pollutants that you want to put under control in order to say, now the air is clean, acceptable, very clean, very pure, whatever you want. So if the administrations and the politicians do not define what clean air means, and therefore they don't define the portfolio of pollutants that we should cap, they are not asking the automotive industry to use their scientific power to find the best possible solution. And then we'll continue to run after CO2 for 30 years, then after particles for a few years, then after NOx for other years, and what's next? So my only point is to say, if you want the automotive industry to be serving the societies in which you operate, which is our goal, you have to do your part of the job, which is, one, define what is clean air, what are the pollutants that you want to put under control, and two, you have to think in terms of well to wheel, and not only in terms of tank to wheel, which means you also need to make sure that the way we produce power, electricity, is clean as much as the future mobility devices we are going to use. So we need to take this problem on a more global and more long-term perspective, because currently it's very short-term, it's very much led by elections, short-term objectives, and this is not what the society is looking for. Society is looking for some kind of stability and some kind of thoughtfulness in the way we ask the automotive industry to use its scientific power to serve the societies in which you operate.
One last question. According to your knowledge, which is, by the way, big one in the car industry, if you look to the perspective of pure battery electric, I'm calling pure EV, maybe I'm wrong, but I like to call it like that, or fuel cell technology, what do you think could be the future on a short-term and a long-term perspective of these technologies?
I think that the depth of evaluation of those two technologies so far is not enough. We could answer quite superficially that fuel cells is not clear enough because we don't know how we are going to develop the infrastructure and how we are going to fund it. But perhaps there are solutions. On the other side, we tend to say electric vehicles are the answer because we know the technology is something that we control a little bit better, but at the same time, we did not answer completely to the question how you create clean electricity. Do we need more nuclear plants? How are we going to create this electricity? Certainly not with coal plants. If not, it would be counterproductive. So how we create clean electricity, how we fund the budgets of the societies with all the taxes we have on petrol and diesel, is all of those taxes are going to move to the electricity? What does that mean in terms of total cost of ownership of an EV car? Are the governments and the societies going to be able to continue to give huge subsidies to buy an electric car? In France, you get 10,000 euros if you want to buy an electric vehicle. How much time can we support this kind of subsidies? For sure, not for a lot of time. How are we going to recycle the batteries? What about the rare earth raw materials? Do we have enough to make all the batteries that we need for a world of pure electric mobility? All of those questions are still to be answered. And I think the problem we have trying to answer the key question that you ask is we are not deep enough. I mean, we cannot work alone on the automotive industry. This is a wider problem that goes from the planet resources to the energy production, to the mobility and the freedom of mobility. Freedom of mobility is something that is at the core of democracy. If freedom of mobility becomes very expensive, does it mean that only the wealthy will be able to be mobile in the future societies? I'm not sure this is what we want for our democracies. So you see, the problem of that question, which is a great one, is that the answers are superficial. And I would like to avoid to be superficial in that answer. I just call for a better collaboration between the politicians, the administration, and the car companies to be able to address and embrace the problem on a global basis and not only on the mobility device. It is quite easy to take the mobility customers as hostages of this discussion, and we should not do that. We should protect mobility and freedom of mobility.
Mr. President, thank you very much for the interview.
My pleasure.
The last answer will be like a clear message coming from Carlos Tavares to all of you people, politicians, consumers, media, because that's probably the key message we need today. And thank you very much for this great interview. Thank you.
Thank you.